We've been doing the show already.
Yeah?
Yeah, we're halfway through it.
Well, thanks for joining us, guys. That's how I have a conversation with my wife about should we have pizza or not. All right, guys. Welcome to Spontaneous Generation.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Why do we call it that? I'm glad to have you here. All right, let's talk about why is it even called that, right? What kind of name is a Spontaneous Generation? What does that mean? It doesn't mean anything.
Well, I mean, obviously it's a generation.
It's obviously generation.
Right. And it's very spontaneous.
Just like us, right?
I don't know. Are you?
I'm not that spontaneous, to be honest.
All right, we're changing the name, guys.
So why spontaneous?
Well, the idea behind the name was primarily to say, okay, number one, the generation part, but the generation of ideas also. So so generating ideas in a spontaneous way, like a conversation, right? So that's one layer of meaning, right? The spontaneous generation of ideas. We're also generation 2, right? He's a millennial. I'm just a month and like 3 days from being a millennial. And what's your generation called, I guess, technically?
I don't know.
Baby boomer?
Your generation X?
I'm just kidding.
No, you're not a boomer.
Well, how old do you think?
No.
I've never looked into figuring out what the generation time slots are.
I think it's Gen X, right?
Oh, Gen X. I have heard that
Gen
before.
X.
Colors?
Hang on, I gotta count.
Well, I guess it's the one after or
before
before millennials.
One, yeah, it's the one right before.
So that's what?
That should be Gen X, Gen Y. It's Gen Y.
I don't know. I forget.
It's Gen Y, I think. Anyway, we'll figure out what it is.
I only know I'm a millennial because of everyone that's like the word
Everyone
these
that points
days.
at you and laughs at you and says you're a millennial.
Yeah. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't know either.
Well, yeah. So the generation part is obviously it's representative of humans, which are a part of some kind of generation. But more than that, it's the play on words of the idea, the actual idea that at one time was a scientific idea of spontaneous generation, which was a prevailing idea for a long time, which is that life could spontaneously generate itself from nothing, right? Which was
that's deep.
Yeah, so it was
I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, well,
That part.
it's called the other term for it is called abiogenesis, which is life that spawns from itself,
Right.
And so the idea was long-standing until then. Louis Pasteur, one of the things that made him famous was that he showed that when you had meat that sat there, it wouldn't spoil unless the flies, or not, it wouldn't spoil, but it wouldn't grow maggots unless flies got on it first.
Right.
So people would see the meat, and then maggots would come out. And where did the maggots come from? They must have spawned from the ether, from the universe. It just spawned by itself. But Louis Pasteur was one of the first ones that showed that it actually spawns from a previous life form. So life comes from life.
Right.
And that's
interesting.
That's the
so
spontaneous
that's the
generation.
Of this
so it's basically
this.
it's ideas that have been possibly long-standing that we might talk about on this show.
Yeah.
And that may be uprooted. Right? Ideas that may longer be shown to not be valid, just the way Louis Pasteur showed that the spontaneous generation was no longer valid. Right? We're going to talk about unorthodox ideas or perspectives or viewpoints, and see whether they, hold up to our arguments. We're going to try to test them, test each other's, viewpoints, and then see if they hold up, then then they hold up, and if they don't hold up, then they get uprooted, just like the spontaneous generation, abiogenesis, right? It's kind of interesting, right?
Yeah, I like it.
Got some kind of play on words.
I didn't like it first when I first heard of it,
Neither
but
did I.
now that I understand, I think it's growing on me.
Yeah, I like it less now. So that's kind of the idea behind the name of the show. We'll have a vote afterwards, and if we don't like it, we'll just change it.
Then it'll be spontaneous combustion.
Then it'll
and
be
it's
yeah. Then hopefully that doesn't happen to any of us. But, so yeah,
I like that one a little more. Has a better ring to it.
Great.
No, I mean this is starting. I mean,
Now I gotta change the Twitter account, and I gotta change the Instagram. I gotta change the YouTube, and I'll get it adjusted. So that's basically the rationale for the name of the show, right? So we have
Cool.
3 different people here, right, and possibly other people to join us later, from different backgrounds, right, different career paths, but we do have a few things in common, and that's that we're male. We're mammals.
That's about
We're
it.
male mammals, and that's
There's a
about
lot of things. We're humans living on Earth. There's a lot of stuff.
you know.
I think.
So
Yeah,
basically that's it. We're practically
we'll
family,
find all
right?
the commonalities. I think.
And so I think that we think a little bit differently than most people. You know, we have perspectives that I think tend to challenge what other people may accept.
I don't know if I agree
So, please.
with that because like we might think that we think very differently than other people,
Yeah.
except that like you might start finding out that there's a lot of people out there that think like you and like me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Luckily, I have the advantage. I talk to new people almost every day.
Really?
Strangers, yeah. I like to talk to people, so I literally talk to people almost every single day.
Right.
Remember, I was just
And you
telling
haven't come across anyone else that thinks like it.
that things like me.
Yeah.
My twin. No, I haven't come across
haven't
my
found him, okay.
evil twin. I'm still looking for him. But like yesterday, I drummed up a conversation. I was in a store, and there was 2 chess pieces that were by themselves, 2 Roman chess pieces. There was a Roman standard eagle, and then there was a little Jupiter, a chess piece, right? And they were just by themselves, and the guy who was there working, he was trying to tell the other girl that worked there that they were, Roman. And she didn't seem very interested, to be honest. But I was right next to them, and I said, oh yeah, that's definitely a Roman eagle. You could tell by the way it's stylized, and that's either Neptune or it's Jupiter, because he was holding something I couldn't tell what he was holding. Mm-hmm. And then we kind of go through it, and it's definitely. And so we started talking about mythology and Roman, the connections between Roman and Greek mythology, and how that affected the views of Christ, right? And how he's portrayed, and then that went into talking about art, and it turns out that I mentioned something about my buddy Oscar, who went to Art Center, and who's an illustrator, and then he mentioned that oh yeah, his niece, I think, or great niece, went to Art Center, and that he was the focus of an art exhibit at Art Center during that time when they did that. So it was just, it's interesting how it just kind of, a conversation with a stranger goes on into this conversation about the meaning of information. That was where we ended up talking about.
Wow.
And so it was about a 30-minute conversation. My wife was waiting for me, kind of wondering when. I mean, she was looking around and shopping and stuff too, but it was a nice conversation, and it was with the person that just kind of randomly just spoke to. So I like to get different people's perspectives when possible.
Right.
Right.
Wow.
Without seeming kind of creepy, and going up to. You can't always talk to everybody that's a stranger, because, well, we shouldn't try to, because then people might think you're going to steal their wallet and get punched in the face.
Yeah.
So-
I'm sure that would happen.
Yeah. But I think there's some perspectives that we might have that are a little bit unorthodox. Maybe they're completely orthodox and we just don't know it, right? I think people will let us know if that's the case. So
Maybe.
But,
I don't
Well,
know.
the thing about the internet, you find people that think alike, so if whoever's going to watch this and likes it is because they already think like that. So, I mean, we're not going to get to people that think something completely differently. Like the other day I was hearing how, like, you go to like when you're in high school, all the people around you, they're kind of like, they think similarly, and you kind of, there's nothing beyond that little bubble of high school. You go to college, you start meeting people from different backgrounds, different social statuses or whatever, and you start to see all the things that you never saw, when you were in high school, because you were all in that same little bubble. Same, like for example, when I went, they're all mostly Hispanics, lower kind of
income, you could say
income, yeah. So yeah, no, I mean, I was just trying to think of the word. So we all kind of have like, oh yeah, what's next, college or job or whatever, but that's it. That's all the conversation. There's nothing beyond that. You go to college, you start meeting people from different backgrounds. They come from different states, different countries. You start seeing their perspectives, and you start opening up more.
Yeah.
So I think, like right here, the same thing. Yeah, people around us here in Ontario or Chino or Pomona, wherever, yeah, they all kind of have that same similar way of seeing things. But obviously, there's a bunch of other people that we've never met because we haven't traveled to certain places or, somehow met each other. But there's still those people that also have a similar way of seeing things that are similar to ours. We just haven't met them. So I don't think like that whole unorthodox, I mean, we do have certain ways of seeing things, but that doesn't mean that we're unique in any way, because I don't think we're.
Well, you are a unique snowflake.
I mean,
so.
Well, don't call me
but when
snowflake.
it comes to the perspectives, I think you're right. Like as soon as you step out of your immediate surroundings, you start to find that there's a whole bunch of people that also think very similar things. Maybe not exactly, but you start finding some commonalities in like all these other
and I
people
think
around you.
it's important for both ourselves and others to expose ourselves to some of the different perspectives, because I think it's.
So I think, I mean, that brings us to this, right? Like, so that's a little bit the point of this whole show.
Yeah.
And I think it'll do that. Like, one of the things that I remember talking to Jehu about a while back, before his YouTube channel kind of took off a little bit, he had a hard time finding other people that he can relate to, that he could share these ideas, because, like, look at the stuff that he's into, right?
Yeah.
Like, he's into batteries, and not a lot of people are into batteries, for example, right? Like that alone.
Yeah.
And just like that, there's a bunch of other of his interests that he's like, I don't have too many people around. He doesn't have too many people around him, and he used to express that a lot. And then he started this YouTube channel where he started talking about all these things, and he just kind of started putting it out there. And all of a sudden, he finds himself in the middle of a community of people that are like hardcore into batteries.
Yeah.
Which, a couple years back, we wouldn't have imagined that even existed. Like, what? There's all these people that are into this thing. And before that, it was filmmaking and trying to make film look a specific way. And then that was our whole journey. And it was like, we didn't know there was that many people trying to make video give it this like film look, which is what we were trying to do by designing these tools. And, like in the internet, we found that, oh wow, there's a huge community of people trying to do this exact same thing, and eventually those people became our clients. And the same thing with.
It's funny. I remember when Jehu, when he first made that I think it was a 35 millimeter look one, and he showed it to me, and he's like, "Look, we just made this," and I saw it, and I could see that it looked like that. But I mean, I'm not a filmmaker, and so it was. And at that time, I was even less interested in that. So I didn't see what the big whoop was.
Value,
I didn't see the value of it. I thought it was pretty cool, because I said, oh, that looks cool. It looks like a movie or something. But that was the extent of it. Was a curiosity.
Yeah.
But like you said, then he was able to kind of find a whole community of people who had similar views and wanted to achieve the same goal.
So like both me and Jehu were into filmmaking, and when we were trying to figure out how to get this look in video camcorders, we also didn't realize the value or what that meant. You know what I mean? Like, we knew we wanted that look, and we were trying to figure out ways to achieve it. And we would like try this and try that and experiment with this thing and like try to piece this thing together. But we still didn't understand what that meant for everyone else. You know what I mean? And it wasn't until we posted our progress online. So Jehu started posting this in a forum somewhere, right? And it's all these people that were like also trying to kind of do a similar thing. And it's not until we started to post that stuff that we're like started to see the feedback and started to see how many people were also trying to do that same thing somewhere else, in other parts of the world. and how close they were coming to kind of figuring it out. And eventually it was like some of those people did the same thing that we did and made a company and like started making these tools to sell them. And then, it turned into this whole revolution. And eventually, DSLRs came out with video functionalities, and it kind of killed that business. But like, that was the beginning of that whole thing. And it was this industry revolution.
And that's what I think is nice is the fact that you guys, and I mean, it wasn't designed to turn into a conversation about the adventures of Jehu, but
no, of course.
But what's interesting is you and him didn't just wait for that to happen. Like, we want that look, so let's see who develops it.
Right. Yeah.
I think a lot of us may have that. Is we want something and we may just kind of wait for it to come around instead of saying, who says I can't develop it myself?
Well, who says that?
That's
the
that's
brainwashing
exactly
that we grew up with tells us that, someone should do that.
Yeah.
That's the thing. That's the thing that everyone
that's
thinks.
not
right?
our role.
It's like when we're thinking of a thing and we're like, yeah, someone should do that. Like, why can't that be us?
I think that's a byproduct of the kind of compartmentalized mentality that we have in society, where we each have these different roles.
Right.
It's like there was someone that we were having a conversation about. I think it was like 18th and 19th century natural philosophers, right? What you would call scientists these days, and how there was like these amazing breakthroughs in like science during those times. I mean, you had people like Nikola Tesla, you had people like Volta and Watt. I mean, you had these people who were doing like what's that guy, Maxwell? People who they weren't just theorists who were thinking up ideas. They were also like engineers. So they were like thinking the ideas, they were testing the ideas, but they were actually making things. They were trying to construct things themselves to try, how do I test my idea?
Yeah.
So basically they did everything, So what that allowed them to do, it allowed them to take their ideas further.
Right.
And I think like now we were talking about devolving, right? How how the ideas and meaning seem to have been devolving. Because now you have that compartmentalized. You have theorists and you have engineers, and then sometimes they don't talk to each other. Right? And obviously that's specific to like academia, but that trickles down to us, that says your job is to do this.
Right.
And your job is not to step over into this guy's territory. Right. Their job is to do this. So you stay within your domain, this guy stays within his domain, right. And then you have to kind of, do this tough negotiation in order for you guys to work together.
Right.
And
so I think that the cool thing or the interesting part about like someone like Jehu or people that are DIY, that it's like we didn't learn things the way we learn things in school because we didn't really go to school the same way. Like me and Jehu both grew up in Mexico for the first part of our, the first 10 years, and we didn't really go to school the same way. And then when we came here, we went a couple years, or we went to high school and all that stuff. But like Jehu didn't even conform to that, like he literally dropped out. He just didn't finish. So he didn't learn things the way that, this society teaches us to do things.
Which wasn't such a bad thing to be.
I mean, I think it's just a different route, right?
Yeah.
And I think that route allows you to experiment with things that you're discouraged to when you learn things in this way,
Exactly. It's having individuality. I think we talked about that once before, right? I mean, you come from the more institutionalized college education, and so there seems to be a little bit of conformity, that seems to be put upon people just because they have authority figures there as well, Right. And so I think that's something that it gives structure, which structure is necessary to a certain point, right? But I think it should serve its purpose, whatever that purpose is deemed to be. And then beyond that, there should be...
If it gets in the way...
and that's the thing, is what does it get in the way of? Yeah. I think people would benefit from having that discussion, even in business. In business, when it comes to people looking at how they operate their business processes, right? Operations, logistics, when it comes to branding, design, when it comes to film, when it comes to animation. I I think it behooves people to say, okay, this is the way I was kind of told by society, by my authority figures, by my peers to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Is it okay for me to test those ideas out to see if they hold down to any scrutiny, right? We were talking just last week about, what is rationality, what makes sense, what's logical, but I think that could be a mechanism, right? Is to use something similar to the scientific method
Mm-hmm.
to say, okay, maybe I could use something like that to test these ideas, right? And see if it still makes sense, like I think it was like 2 weeks ago, I was thinking about business plans, right? How business plans function, right? And I think I tweeted something about that, but it's business plans. What it essentially tries to do is you're planning your business before you even start it,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you have the plan, but what that really is making you do, it's making you forecast what's going to happen,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you're making projections based on what's going to happen. So you're basically trying to predict the future,
Right.
And so in these dynamic times, the question is, does it make sense to continue using only that approach? Not saying that business plans are not a good idea. What
Yeah.
I'm saying is traditional business plans are not a good idea. Right? Traditional business plans have a missing element, which is we can't predict the future. So things are changing so quickly. I mean, we were just talking about the blockchain just a minute ago, right? And so, which is going to change a lot of the industries from a fundamental level. So, if we continue to take something like a business plan and just say, well, this is the way I was told to do it, right? It should work. Well, we should be able to feel like we have permission to say, well, why does it have to be that way? Could there be another route?
And it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah, exactly.
I think we
that's the thing.
understand that it doesn't have to be one way. There's multiple ways of doing things.
Yeah.
But getting back to the point, because I think we can go in a million different directions, right?
Yeah.
But getting back to the point is that putting this on the internet allows us to find this common ground, right? Because now all of a sudden you reach out with whatever subjects or whatever point of views,
Yeah.
and there's an audience that might be able to relate.
And some people feel alienated because of it. I know Jehu had mentioned before that he kind of felt like, he couldn't talk to someone about that. And I felt like that too. I don't know if you felt like that as well.
Of course.
But there's certain things that you feel like maybe you need to, even just intellectually, being able to have conversations with people on that level. And, it opens up kind of that possibility to say, to have those conversations, to share perspectives, and to be able to learn from each other.
That's the beauty of the internet. It allows people to find that common ground. Because and not only like with our way of thinking, but also, you can also see the other side when you see like these terrorists, ISIS. They're all coming together because of the internet. So obviously, the internet's a powerful platform that allows people with similar ways of thinking to come together. Both good and bad. Obviously, we're not trying to do that, but yeah, it's there, and we've seen it over and over that it does do that. It does bring people, find people together and create something, hopefully good in our part, but
well, definitely
we've seen the
it
bad
can be
part
powerful.
too.
Yeah, it can be powerful, and then whether it's good powerful or bad powerful, that's where at least we're on the path of using it for good powerful.
Oh, you are? No, I was.
Yeah,
no, I was
definitely
all
good,
for the
powerful.
bad.
He used to think about his selfish idea.
Yeah.
Way easier.
Yeah, and it's
There's a master plan behind
I
it.
didn't
Yeah,
realize. I didn't realize you guys were. trying to do the good
when
thing.
he did this, I should have realized something is up. So, but yeah, I think that's interesting that harnessing that platform and utilizing it for the betterment of whatever, yourself or mankind or whatever is important. I think the collaboration aspect is I think something that more and more we need to embrace. You guys have heard of people talking about the sharing economies and things like that? In fact, it's kind of interesting because just in the meeting we had last week, it talked about that essentially, sharing economy. I don't know if you remember that, but do you remember particularly we talked about sharing resources and
Tell me
sharing?
about what meeting?
The meeting at the hall.
I didn't go.
Oh, pues. Bueno.
Yeah,
Wait, is that the day you were in Long Beach?
Sure.
Were you?
Anyway,
He doesn't. Okay, so he doesn't want to say. So, anyways, moving on. The so the sharing economy is one way that also people are trying to kind of step away from the traditional ways of looking at resources,
Mm-hmm.
right, and trying to find a way that seems to be more beneficial for everyone. You know, so I think it steps away from the traditional kind of bottom line oriented way of doing things, and it kind of tries to make it socially conscionable, you know. So it makes it something that seems to be good. So I don't know what you guys think about that.
I don't know. I mean that it's such a tough thing to even get into because again we'll get into based on whose criteria, you know. When you say, "Oh yeah, this is going to be a good thing," well, good for who?
Yeah, like what does that even mean? Like, yeah,
good for
exactly.
who? And if it's good for these people, well, then is it good for these other people?
Yeah,
And who gets to decide
Yeah.
that it is? You know,
yeah, exactly.
because then yeah, so that's a really tough thing to
Yeah, yeah.
to pinpoint, and I think no one can really, you know, speak for a mass group. You know, like you can only speak from your own experience and from,
yeah.
from your position that you're in. So
yeah, yeah.
I mean, yeah, I think we can argue all day about it, but it's like
No, but I think
ultimately-
it goes back to what we were talking about last week. Was about
Mhm.
as long as we understand if it's a micro perspective versus a macro perspective. I think that's where
yeah,
we're understanding which perspective we're talking about.
yeah,
That lets us know: are we talking about apples or are we talking about oranges?
yeah.
You know. And but anyways, that being said, that's why the show is called what it's called. That's what we're trying to do here, is just kind of have these spontaneous conversations about these things that are good based on whatever you consider is good.
Okay, so let's elaborate that a little bit. So, what do you hope to get out of these conversations?
Well, I think that there's a few things. I think one of the things is that there are perspectives that I may have because of my particular experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that being able to share some of those experiences might be able to help someone learn something, right? And I'm hoping that along the way I can also learn something from both you guys' perspectives and those who are watching as well. I think there's benefits to be had by being able to unite perspectives, you know, because uniting perspectives, I think we enlarge our perspectives, you know, and I think having these larger perspectives can ultimately end up in more good, and I air quotes, right? Because what does that even mean? But that's something that we can
So-
good for who, good for, yeah, but we can go into, that's a whole nother thing.
So I think a little bit different than you, and like, you know, what I hope to get out of this is to learn how to take some of these perspectives and compare them, right, with my own, and that's ultimately going to teach me something
Mhm.
about the way that I think and the way that I see things.
Mhm.
The other thing that I hope to gain from something like this is to, I guess, to like expand on my ability to express the things that are going on about some of these subjects, right? In my head, not
Yeah.
going on, but going on in my head, like,
Yeah, yeah.
and allow them to kind of come out and like flow easily. And the only way to do that is by doing it, by like
you feel like there's more
expressing.
clarity in your ideas when you're able to
Absolutely.
get them out?
If you have to verbalize a thing, that means your thought process now has to figure out how to put it in a way where you have to try and
It makes
and
sense to someone
explain
that's not yourself,
right?
basically.
So it's
Yeah.
almost. I mean, I think this is a good exercise for seeing some of these ideas through someone else's perspective. Because if I'm trying to explain it to you, I'm going to say it a certain way
Yeah.
based on what I know about you, so that you're able to now absorb this information. And if I'm
Yeah.
telling him based on what I know about him, well, I'm going to tailor fit it to say it in a way that he might be
Yeah.
able to understand the thing. If I'm
Yeah.
talking to another filmmaker, I'm going to we speak with different terms and different. You know, I'm going to say different things to him.
Yeah.
So in a way, like explaining some of these concepts that are in your heads, right? Like, it's beneficial to do it in different platforms because
Yeah.
you explain it in different ways, and it helps you understand So to me, it might sound a little bit selfish, but like I feel like that's what I hope to get out of
Yeah,
this.
no, I
For
don't
me
think.
to understand this thing, like these things that are going on in my
Yeah.
head, even better. If someone else, like get something great, out of it,
Yeah.
great. I mean, but I don't think that's my purpose.
Yeah, it's more personal growth, which
It's
is
like it's about
which is fine.
this,
Yeah.
and I feel like if that's genuine, if I'm trying to genuinely like figure these things out about myself,
Yeah.
and someone else happens to observe that and is able to get something out of it because it's a genuine thing that I'm trying to do, it's a possibility for them to learn something. But if my purpose was the other way around, like I'm going to tell you guys all these things that I know about stuff in the hopes that you learn something first, like that's my first goal.
Yeah.
I think now things are not as genuine. I think now all of a sudden it becomes this like tainted purpose rather than like this exploratory way of looking.
Yeah,
at it.
yeah, I see what you mean. I think it's
It's hard for me to even explain that right
No, no,
now,
no,
but
no,
I
because
think
I-
I'm only
I think
touching
it's
that.
I think
like
it's
right now.
it has to do with the roles that we play in society too,
Right.
because a lot of us are a lot of us play different roles.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're the student, sometimes we're the master. Sometimes we are the worker, sometimes we're the boss.
Mhm.
It depends on the role that we're playing. Sometimes we're the father, right? Sometimes we're the son.
Mhm.
Sometimes we're the friend, sometimes we're the trusted companion. So I mean, we all play these different roles, and I think there's I can see your point though. I think some of us have we are in the role of educator sometimes. Me in
Mhm.
particular, I am a teacher and an educator as well,
Mhm.
so I see things a little bit from that perspective as well,
Mhm.
and I think that's what affects that viewpoint and how the
Yeah.
information is expressed outwardly. So that's I think that's pretty interesting. So it's authenticity is definitely something that that's why we're doing this kind of format, right? So we can just have a conversation,
Yeah.
and so that we can kind of express what we need to express, and I mean I think like you said, we're learning about ourselves also by doing that, and then like you said, we're learning to relate to other people by expressing it outwardly. So which I think is pretty cool. So is that it? All right, guys, we're done. No, we're not done.
I mean, it's up to you.
No,
so
okay.
that's the thing, right? These are conversations, very spontaneous. How long do you want them to be? That's, I guess,
Well, we can take it to. Do you want to talk about anything particular? Anything else it's something that's been troubling your mind that you want to get out? I mean, this is your time to.
troubling my mind.
So a weight on your shoulder that you want to get. You need a hug.
Well, I mean, the angle wouldn't be right, so I'll
I'd
save
be out
that
of
for
frame.
later. Can
I
I
say not from you.
Yeah, no, I mean, I wasn't. So, I mean, we could talk about why am I even here? Like, I feel a little bit weird.
Me too.
Only because I'm not used. Like, I don't have any experience on camera, although I've been in front of a camera a couple times, but.
Do you feel like it's not your natural place? Like.
Oh, definitely not. I mean, because I'm usually the guy that's behind the camera, like running things and like figuring out all the things
Yeah.
and tweaking. And at this point, it's like it's a different experience because it's like, okay, you set up everything and you get it ready to go, and then you kind of just have to let go, you know. And that's a little bit different than. Like usually you're in control and you can like tweak and
I
change.
think
and
that's exactly what I was going to say.
do
Is
stuff.
that you're playing a different role now, where you're used
Yeah.
to being a role of control,
yeah,
and not in a negative sense, but just that you need to, because that's your job. Your job is to control the situation from behind the scenes.
right.
And now it's like it's a vulnerable position when you're in front of the camera. I think a lot of us
Yeah.
who are not used to being in front of the camera feel like that a little bit.
Right.
Is this vulnerability that we're kind of not used to?
Well, but it's different because like we could be like not recording right now and I wouldn't know it. But because that's my job is usually to know that this is recording. you
Yeah.
know? And for this project specifically, I don't have an assistant, so it's not like I can say, "Hey, watch out for this, this, and
Yes.
this."
Yeah.
At this point, it's like, are we still rolling? Are we just here talking?
But isn't that the best part though, when you forget that it's rolling? Like I think that's when we hit that point where it's like you're just having a
But
genuine
for
conversation.
for podcast or when you're recording it, you can't also forget, because then you start to digress and you just completely go into random things that no one cares about. Maybe us, but no one
Hey,
else.
spontaneous generates.
So-
Which
Oh.
I think it's fine. That's right. Like it's what we're doing right now, this second.
Right.
Only because we ran out of whatever. Like before this, I was fine. I was like having this conversation, and I was engaged. And then when you pulled out and we're like, okay, now what? Then I'm like, well, I'm gonna go to my go-to thing, which is
Yeah.
this show, making it happen, and like the technicalities of it happening. And
would it be prudent to maybe share a little bit about what we do? That way people can get a background of, like I said,
Sure,
your
tell me what you
thing is filmmaking, and you've worked on some pretty cool jobs, I think.
yeah.
And is there anything in particular about that you like? That does it make you feel a particular way? Is there a certain thing that you?
About filmmaking?
Yeah, just to make.
Yeah, filmmaking I feel is an amazing tool to communicate ideas, and I think it's like the ultimate tool to communicate ideas, in a way, because it's such a complex thing. It's like it requires all the different art elements or mediums, and
Yeah.
like and they all kind of come together in this one way, like through film, right?
Yeah.
Through like a moving image and sound and like dressing up things and acting and like in music. So like it involves all of the things, right?
Yeah.
Writing.
So it's like if we've ever been impressed by a really beautiful music piece,
Mhm.
or a real beautiful, wardrobe type of design or something, and thought to ourselves like, man, that'd be really cool. Like, how much work was that? This is like, well, now just imagine combining all that
Yeah,
to like
yeah.
one cohesive, beautiful piece that communicates a certain specific idea.
Yeah, or moment or feeling.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
that's the
it's-
thing. That's the power that you can communicate a feeling,
Yeah.
and a mood, and the thing. I mean, not to take away from each individual thing, because I feel like, in a way, because this is such a complex way to tell stories.
yeah,
It also kind of gets watered down a little bit, because there's like all of these artists working for this one thing with so many restrictions, right? And
Mhm.
like, while a songwriter can write a piece that like is just a song, and like even just the chorus of a song can get you to feel and think about the right things, or the things that they wanted you to think,
Yeah.
without all of the things, without all of the bells and whistles that you get with filmmaking, so
yeah,
so not to take away from that. Or a painting, like a painting can do that for you, and it's just a
Yeah.
still image that you look at, and people like think and look at and wonder, and for years after that thing was made, right?
yeah.
People will continue to. So I mean, not to take away from those elements as well.
No, but that's true, because I've
Um,
seen that. There's films. In fact, I just recently saw a film that had a certain amount of that, where there were certain parts of the film that seemed to work, but a great deal of the film seemed like they were overcompensating, and it seemed like they could have done with a lot less, and they were putting in too much. It was almost like they were just trying to fill it with fluff, maybe trying to thinking that more. It wasn't a movie with effects. It was just bad acting, but maybe bad writing as well.
What movie was this?
It's called The Circle. If you liked it, I apologize, but I did not like it.
Is that the tech movie?
That's
I
the one that
haven't
looks
seen it,
like.
but,
It's basically like Tom Hanks is the
Okay.
head of a company. It's called The Circle, and they're kind of like a mix between like Facebook and Apple. Basically, is what it is. I mean, even the computers, on the back of the computers, instead of an apple, they have a little circle logo on there. So it's and they have the whole campus. That's spoiler alert, by the way. Sorry if you haven't seen it, but I thought it was a terrible movie. There's one part at the end that was kind of decent, but it was only because I wanted to see how bad it would get that I saw the whole thing till the end. So if there was something that happened at the end that made the movie say, okay, you know, I'm glad I watched that part, like literally the last like 10 minutes. But the rest of it I thought was not very well done. And I'm not an expert in film, you know, but I've seen good films and I've seen bad films. And there was an element of either overcompensation, or there was something that they were trying to do that just wasn't, they didn't do it right. It just just sounded wrong, if that makes any sense. I mean, maybe to quantify it, is
it doesn't to me because, and I'm serious about that. It
No,
doesn't
yeah,
sound right to me because, like, you can sit there and criticize like all you want, whatever it is that someone else did, but that's just your opinion.
Yeah, and that's exactly what my opinion was. It sounded very forced. The acting seemed very
Acting is
inauthentic.
a forced thing, whether it looks genuine or not.
Yeah, and it's kind of
So
it's funny
you're
because
absolutely right
it's
about
like
that.
because it's acting. It's like, of course, everything is, it's all forced, but you know, the illusion of authenticity just did not work. In my personal
Some people
opinion,
might be looking at this thing and be like,
some people
that
may,
was amazing.
some people may say that,
and they're like,
that, you know,
did not
they're,
notice the
yeah,
thing
they're at
that you're
liberty
noticing.
to like it.
Yeah.
I
So that's
just-
the only reason it doesn't make sense, because I'm like, I didn't watch it. I don't think the same things. That's just this thing that you're saying that a bunch of other people might agree and a bunch of other people
Yeah,
might
I
not
hope
agree.
you watch it. That way you kind
And,
of
like-
give it your own, and then we could talk about it later. But I thought, anyways.
Well, after your review, I don't know if I'm going to.
He took your review seriously.
All right, so the next movie we're going to review is which one? Anyway, so how do we get to that? You were talking about the power of film, right? And
Oh, I mean,
why
I-
you
yeah, I
think
just,
it's,
I think it's a. That's why I think I like film, and that's one of the things that I think I was drawn to, and why I'm pursuing that type of
yeah,
industry.
it's powerful, man. Storytelling and
Yeah.
and I mean, just storytelling by itself, the medium in which the story is told, like you said, video and film, just makes it that much more powerful. I was going to ask Art if is there anything that drew you to, finance and investing and business, or is that something you just
Money.
stumbled onto? You know, you're
I mean,
playing with your Legos, and all of a sudden you're like, you know what, I'm going to be an investor.
no, I think it came just through time, because I remember like back in like junior high we did in math class we're doing some the teacher brought in the stock market. We were doing some project on the stock market, and we had to pick some stocks. I mean, obviously I had no idea what exactly. I mean, just from what he told us, like the basic explanation, but
Yeah.
I didn't really understand it. But then there's this friend, a family friend, he was a teacher, and then I told him about it once, conversation, and he got excited. I'm sure I never asked him, but I'm sure he invested. I mean, he's a math teacher, So, so just that kind of like reaction that I got from him kind of got me like, oh, maybe there's more to this, And then just over time, I just learned, started reading up on it. I would start reading the financial section of the newspaper. When
You're hating yourself there, man. Newspaper.
Huh? No, but I mean, it's just like I found it interesting, just something I didn't understand that I wanted to understand more, and like just the fact that you can own a piece of this company, just basically that's kind of what it is.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously it's insignificant when you have one share of something, but that was a concept that kind of intrigued me. And then just over time, I started reading up on it and reading books, and finally I bought my first stock, and just that kind of rush initially. Initially, it's a rush. You buy a stock, it goes down the next day. You go like, you don't understand why, but just that excitement just kind of kept me there.
Yeah.
And yeah, I definitely lost money, and even now I still lose money, but once you start learning and you become more disciplined, and you have you see it from a more systematic angle instead of just like from gambling or speculating that this is gonna go up or whatever because it's
So just
Apple.
just to clarify, when you say you still lose money, you're saying there's good days and bad days. That's what you're saying.
No, of course, but I mean that's kind of with
it's
everything.
not a downward spiral. Is what you're. I just want
yeah.
to clarify. Just
But-
so you know,
no,
in case
yeah.
you ever want to get his advice on investing, it's not like.
No, but this is the thing. Like back to what he was saying, like, or I think I was telling to you the other day. It's like, you turn on, the finance channel, you hear all these pundits saying, oh, the economy is doing great, or this stock is, buy this stock now because it's going up, and then it goes down. I mean, I don't listen to any of that without looking into it myself, like doing my own research.
Mhm.
And just that same way, I wouldn't tell someone, oh, you should invest in Apple right now because it's going to head up. Like Tuesday, the conference and the new iPhone is going to bring it up. No, because that's just speculation. I have no idea where the market's going on Monday, tomorrow, just like no one else does, because that's not how it works. You can't predict where it's going, So as long as you do your research and you understand the risk that's behind it, and you take those calculations into your system, then do your thing. I can tell you what I think, but I'm not saying this is what's going to happen, or this is do your due diligence.
Yeah, that's the thing.
That's what it comes. And I think that like anything we say here is the same thing. It's my opinion, it's your opinion on whatever it is. It's his opinion, and after that, just take it for that. It's an opinion. If you're still interested, research and check different sources, and then come to your own conclusion on whatever it is.
Isn't that funny? Because that's such just a life lesson, I think. Do your due diligence,
Well, yeah. The problem is that most people just are too lazy, and they rather go on what the person on TV tells them, or the person on the president's telling them what to do, whatever. Right?
I don't agree. I don't agree with that. I don't think that people are too lazy.
There's more to it, but
I think that people have been taken the ability to do their own research.
Well, yeah, I think that's a huge aspect, but I mean, it's kind of hard or a little bit more difficult to elaborate on that too, because you tell that to the average person, they'll be like, no, I can still do I do what I want, or I decide what I'm going to do. But yeah, no, I definitely agree with that, because like in schools, I think critical thinking, it's not something that's really pushed, to do. You're just there to study for a test and pass it.
Yep.
That's the ultimate goal. I mean, there's nothing else beyond that,
And that provides the school with more funding.
Right. So like going back to what
that takes away from people doing their research. Like here, like read this, answer these questions. That's it.
Yeah, and
take it for that value.
We get
and
so
that's
many
it.
students who do
not like
who do
go
this.
and do your research on this, and then there's going to be
that's actually a big problem. And sorry to kind of go outside, but in science, for example, that's actually started to become a big issue that people are worrying about, because what's happening in science is that you have major institutions that are leaders in ideas, and there is a certain amount of pressure for the students to be able to work on those ideas or similar ideas, and are pressured to not go after these radical ideas that may provide a different road, that may be a road that's either unpopular or maybe goes against the status quo. And academia, I mean, there has to be a certain amount of structure into, because again, they have funding.
And I mean, that can also be explained, with psychology, because we like to follow the crowd. We don't like to be isolated. Oh, this guy, he's a weirdo or whatever. People like to be accepted. People like to be, this is what you guys are doing? Okay, then I guess that's what I should be doing too.
Well, think about it, just like you mentioned earlier, about is it possible that people need to do more of their due diligence, or are they just too lazy? I think it's comforting for someone to be able to say, well, I don't want to be responsible for it. You be responsible for it. That way it doesn't fall on me. I think
that's actually another problem too, though, because
even
nowadays people are not taking responsibilities for the stuff.
Well, that's what I mean.
Go back to like 2008 when the financial markets crashed. No, like none of these CEOs that were greatly behind what happened, none of them went to jail. They still took their all their millions, and they retired and did whatever relaxed. So
which I think what's funny about that actually is the same type of financial instrument that caused the bubble in the housing in 2008 that burst, which was a leveraged financial instrument, is the same, fundamentally the same type of instrument that caused the Great Depression. in the 30s, which is a leveraged instrument, which is funny because again, historically, the same pattern was being followed, right? So historically, I mean, again, we're not necessarily experts on housing and finance and things like that, but again, do your due diligence. But how is it that the same thing happened during then?
Why wouldn't it?
And well, that's the thing. See,
Why wouldn't the same
that's
thing
the other
happen?
question. That's what makes it interesting. Is why wouldn't it?
There's this quote
That's the funny thing
from
about
Warren
it,
Buffett
you
that
know?
says that what we learn from history, what people learn from history, is that we don't learn from history. Yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense because we forget things quickly. Yeah, we fall into this pattern and we just continue and perpetuate it, and that's why again, like going back to the stock market, a lot of that there's patterns because psychological pattern, and a big important part of like the stock market is investor psychology.
Yeah.
Because once you understand how you think, your emotions, you control yourself, you also need to understand how the psychology of investors in general works.
Yeah.
Obviously you're never going to understand it because it's too complex, but there are patterns, and once you start to identify that, it's easier to take people's money from because I mean that's
well,
what,
when it
that's
comes to
what
stocks,
what it does.
and
But
that's a good point.
you can see that in not just the stock market, but in other different aspects of life. People just continue to, they forget and they continue to do the same errors. Like you hear like, it's a good reminder. Well, yeah, it's a good reminder if you're gonna apply it. If you're not gonna apply it, then
that's the difference between knowledge and wisdom, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think I think you're right, but like to word it in a different way. I don't necessarily think it's that people forget, right? It's the thing is that these cycles are longer than one person's lifespan. So, these things didn't really happen, in our lifetime. Like, we're not going to remember that. And the thing is that history, like the way society is and the way the people that are in power, like they literally obscure the things that they don't want people to have access to because they stand to benefit, right? So when you're like, well, we forget like the patterns that we have. Like, no. The thing is, society is literally hiding.
Again,
you know what I mean? Their tracks, so that they can do it again.
Yeah, it's a way to maintain conformity.
No, I definitely agree with that. I mean, when I simplify things just to kind of like simplify things because obviously you can go into all the different variables, but there's way too many.
Words, so
there's too many variables to list in a conversation. I definitely agree.
The reason I go after those things, right? It's because those small distinctions are what people buy into.
No, and I'm completely fine with that because I do that with Bryan too. Because sometimes he just focuses on a specific word and takes it too literally, and like, there's more to it. Yeah. So I'm completely fine when you point that out.
Yeah,
I mean, and it's funny because the same thing is true with like a blanket statement that we might say like, oh, everyone does this or all people behave this way, and I like the way you mentioned it because you were specifically talking about like financial patterns, is that we can never know exactly how the things are, but you can notice certain overall patterns.
Yeah.
And I think so. Anyway, so that way we're not too harsh on ourselves
there could be
with the
a
use of
pattern,
language.
and then something happened before, like when you were expecting the next thing to happen, following that pattern. But then this outside thing came in and interrupted that, so it never continued in that pattern that you were expecting.
Yeah. Well, it's like, for example, like when a trend, a financial trend is going downward. Right, and then so people kind of say, "Oh, the overall trend, right, is going down." So even though there's small spikes up, the overall trend is going down, right? But then all of a sudden, the trend starts to actually go up, right? It's not just a spike; it actually starts to go up, when the assumption was that the trend is still going down, right? And so those are the type of things I think where you say it's just how can you predict that?
So like right now, I have an investment in lithium because lithium, that's what batteries are made of, right? So obviously everyone expects that lithium is going to continue going up. But then I was reading something maybe you guys heard about. I haven't really looked into it, but there's some new technology trying to figure out other ways to use other elements instead of lithium. So obviously once that happens and it proves that this is a lot better, more efficient way to produce a battery or cheaper, whatever it is, that lithium investment is going to start dropping. Hopefully, I'm trying to get out at the top. I mean, you can't ever, get at the right moment. But yeah, so I have that in mind. Okay, this is going up right now, but that doesn't mean it's gonna go on up forever because
Everything that goes up
Yeah,
must come
no,
down.
and I think that's the whole point. Is it's about being dynamic. It's about constantly educating ourselves, right? I mean, we all have different objectives and different paths that we're going to, but I think overall, we're constantly educating ourselves.
Yeah.
We're learning about ourselves. We're learning about others around us, and we're constantly trying to see how that applies to our situation. If it doesn't apply, then we may not apply it. If it does apply, but I think the key is we're educating ourselves. Because if we don't educate ourselves,
and going back to
we're going to repeat the mistakes of the past.
Like going back to what you're asking about, what is our purpose of filming this? That's kind of my purpose, just to kind of interact or exchange ideas, because you know something that I don't, he knows something that I don't, and hopefully I know something that you guys don't. Maybe not.
Think so.
But that to me, that's a good way of learning new things, because I mean, I'm all for learning new things and try to grow as a person.
Yeah.
And when you exchange ideas, that obviously helps you see a different perspective that I've never thought of before. And I appreciate that sort of a thing.
Yeah.
So I mean, again. I'm completely for it. Like, exchange ideas, and if he, like, you were talking about, you agree, but there's also this other. Yeah, I'm completely for you pointing those things. Just like I'm going to point out certain things that I might, notice when you guys say, are talking about a specific subject, that maybe I see a different, way of have a different perspective.
Yeah. And I think that's the whole point. I think to share these concepts, these ideas that we have, and how we see things slightly differently this way and slightly this way. And that's, that I think that's what makes it interesting. And that's what makes it a learning experience as well. Because without those differences, then there's nothing. It's just this one point of view.
Yeah.
What's the point?
Yeah, exactly. And that could be it could be wrong. And then that, none of us learn from that. It causes damage. So
cool. So I think
that's,
you guys good?
Yeah, I think unless you guys want to go for another 2 hours.
It's getting warm in here.
All right. Hey, next time we gotta have something to quench our thirst with.
I have water right here.
It's empty. Am I? Or say I'm
It's
negative
about
because
to.
I'm looking at the cup as saying it's empty. It's 1/10 full. Oh, excuse me. So, anyways,
He didn't have to say it.
Yeah, he didn't.
You already knew it.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's already something. All right, so that's today's conversation about why the heck we're doing what we're doing, right? And why it could be a value for us or for others who are listening. And I guess we'll try to do some of these long conversations periodically. And pretty much every week if we can. And
As long as our schedules are
weather
allow
permitting.
us, yeah.
Weather permitting. And and then we'll see. We'll do maybe short ones here and there. It's 10-minute ones, and we might have to structure those a little bit more concisely, so we don't veer off into 10-minute conversations about is the water really a tenth full or 9/10 empty, and then that's all we talk about.
Cool.
And that's it. We're
All
done. Thanks for sharing.
All right. Yeah, thank you guys for
And,
coming.
yeah.
Wait. No, not me for coming.
No, yeah. Thanks for coming.
All right. See you next time.
That's
See
a
you
wrap.
next time.